In this video, I want to show some of the additional capabilities of the Micro800 Simulator. In my last video, I just showed the basics, how the Micro800 Simulator works, and how we could use the virtual wire to connect an output back into an input to drive, our simulation. But there is two capabilities that the simulator can do to kind of quote-unquote connect to external I/O. Of course, we really can't connect to real remote I/O devices, but what we can do is we can either use the built-in REST API of the simulator, or there's an XML capability. So this video, I'm going to first show the API, and I'm going to link it to FactoryTalk Optix, because FactoryTalk Optix also has the ability to be a REST API client. So I got the simulator already up. It's not running right now. It doesn't even matter what I have, if I have any kind of program in the simulator or not. I do have a program running in there, but it's not using any of the embedded I/O. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to make sure that we've enabled the remote I/O, as they call it. So we have to go to Tools, and this all has to be done before I start the simulator. So I go to Tools, I'm going to go to Options, and I'm going to choose to enable the external I/O access, and I'm going to make sure that I'm choosing API. So I have the two options here. Can't do both at the same time. So we're going to enable the API for this time. And I'm going to say OK. Now, I want to say before I start the thing, if we go to Help and go to About Micro800 Simulator, you will open up a help file. And there is a little bit of content here to help guide you with this. Not a lot, but there's a little bit. So underneath the Micro800 Simulator, and then configure the I/O wiring, which is also right over here, we see that they talk about the API and the XML. So for the API, it talks about the steps here that I just did. And there are basically three commands that we could use. We can use the get. Basically we can get the inputs, we can get the outputs, and we can post to either the inputs or the outputs. So we'll get to this point here in just a second to show you kind of what this HTTP string is in a moment. So back on the simulator, I'm going to go ahead and start it. So the first thing we need to know is we need to make note of this API COM port. So in this case, for me, in this instance, it is 52611. Now, every time we create this, it's going to create a new API COM port. So I don't know if there's a way to continue to use the same COM port over and over again. But if you're trying to do something, then know that this COM port might change each time. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this up. It's running, and we've got our API COM port assigned. So first thing to do is we'll just come to we'll go to Postman first, and Postman is just a web tool that I can use to just test the API, capabilities, the get and the as well as the post. So going back to my help file, we see here that the command is for a get to get the value of the inputs. I basically type in, I'll use a get command, and then I'll just, this is the API string. I'm going to use localhost, and this will be the response we get back. Basically, each input and its value, if it's on or off. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this, just so I don't have to type it in, and I'll paste it into my Postman command line here, and I need to make sure to put in the value for the port number, which is 52611. So if I go ahead and hit send, I get my string down here, like, down here in the I guess the JSON window, I see that I get my name IOEMDI00 is false, 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 right? So I'm actually reading from my emulator. Now if I go ahead and turn on a couple of these inputs, and if I go ahead and run this send command one more time, we'll see now that it says true, true, right? So the first three is true, true, and true. So I'm definitely able to read my values. Turn those off. Now, let's say I want to actually write to the values here. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do this here and minimize this window a little bit so we can see this at the same time. So what I need to do is I need to basically, I'm now going to do a post. And I'm going to post to the inputs. Now actually, before I do that, I should say if I come back here and change this to outputs and run this command one more time, you'll see that my IOEMDO00 is a false, false, false. So it's reading the outputs. So they're kind of grouped as either all the inputs or all the outputs. I'll go ahead and put the inputs back on the line here. Now, going back to the help file, if I want to do a post, well, here's the body that I need to basically send. This is a JSON script, so to speak, or string that I have to be able to send. So the format is I'm going to have to do an open bracket and then an open curly brace, and then I need to put the syntax here. Name in quotations, colon, and then the embedded IO point, and then the value, and then true or false. Now, if I was going to write to the to a plugin module, then I can write an actual numerical value to this like an analog output. But in this case, I only have the discrete input and outputs being used in my simulator at the moment. So this is the string I want. I'm going to go ahead and copy this so I don't have to necessarily retype it. Now, to do this, I'm going to first change this to a post, and I'm going to go here to the body. I'm going to choose raw, and you notice how it is a JSON, and I'm going to just basically paste. So I don't have this analog plugin, so I'm going to get rid of that line. And I need to make sure that I update this to the DI00. So I want to turn on my very first input. And the value is going to be true. So again, if I can try to get this all together on one screen for you, we can see that right now 00 is off. So if I come back here and if I run my command, there it went. It just turned on. So now I'll come back to my body, and if I type in false and say send, it turned off. So I can control the simulator just through this API post instruction. And I could basically, send a, multiple string. If I want to do another line, then I could, of course, copy paste this. Missed the brace there, but I'll make sure to put it. And then let's change this to DI maybe 02. And let's go ahead and turn them both on this time. So make them both true. All right, so now if I put that back up in the corner there, and if I send my send command, both 00 and 02 turned on. If I go ahead and change them to false, they will both turn off. All right, so able to prove that we can do this. Now, let's go to Optix and see how we can do this in Optix as well. So I've got an Optix application built, and I went ahead and put some comments here so I wouldn't forget some of the proper syntax, or we can show you, on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and change my. I'm going to go ahead and change this to put my port number that I have for this instance, and that's 52611. All right, so we don't forget that. I've got a push button added, a simple push button, but right now there's nothing configured for the push button. So the first thing we have to do in Optix, for me to do an API client, so I can actually use Optix to now communicate to the simulator, I need to create a REST API client, and I need to put it under my NetLogic. Now, I already had one here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I want to show you how I do it from scratch. We're going to go up here to the library, so that the REST API client is in the template library, and it opens up on the other screen. So all I need to do is I'm going to type in REST, and of course finish type it in the API, but it found it there. So here's the REST API client. I'm going to take the REST API client component and drag it to my NetLogic, and then say close. Now that's really all I got to do. I don't have to set up anything else on this REST API client. There's really two things here. One is the timeout duration, and one is the user agent, basically how the REST API client identifies itself. And right now the default is FT Optix, and no need for us to change that. So when I want to call the REST API client and send this post command to the emulator, I'm going to do that with a push button. So I've added a push button. This happens to be momentary. It doesn't really matter what type it is. And then when I need to do an event, right? So I'm going to create a mouse click event. So I'm going to use the plus symbol to add a new method. And I'm going to go to NetLogic, and here's my REST API client. And in Optix, I've only got three methods: the get, the post, or the put. Now, the put is not a command that is allowed, or a method that is allowed from the Micro800 simulator. So only get and post work. In this case, I want to actually write, I want to write a value to the emulator to turn it on or off. So I'm going to use the post command and say select. Now when I get the post command, I get a few things underneath these input arguments. One is the API URL, which is basically going to be this string right here. And the other one is the request body, and that's basically the syntax that we kind of use there when we test it in the Postman app. I got to put that here as well. And then there are a few other ones, the bearer token and content type, and we can leave those two blank, at least for this application. So for the API URL, I can basically come here and copy this and then bring it back to my API URL and paste it. And for my body, I can copy what I've already created here as well. So I'm going to type this out. Just highlight this, copy it, click back on the push button, and put this into the request body. Now the only thing I need to do too is I want to change this from false to true, and make sure we didn't lose any of our proper syntax, and hit enter. And that's it. Now, so I've got one push button here to turn it on, just for making this an easy demonstration. I'm going to copy this and paste it. I'm going to go ahead and create a second push button, and I'm going to relabel this to say off, basically. And actually, I should have called that DI, right, not DO. Come back and fix this on the other button. Not that it really matters, but I typed that wrong. So come back to my off button, and basically the same method will get invoked. We're going to send a post, API post, and we're going to use that same API client that we've already added there under NetLogic. And all I need to do is I need to change the body from true to false this time. So essentially, when I push the on button, I will send a true, and when I push the off button, it'll send the false. Pretty straightforward. So pretty much that's it. I'm going to go ahead and fire up the emulator. This will open up momentarily. You open up the other window, of course, and we bring up the Micro800 simulator on off screen as well. So now, when I press the DI on button, it sends the post command to over the API to the simulator and turns it on. And if I hit the off button, it sends the post to turn it off. So pretty interesting, pretty powerful. We can create or use the API, so we could build our own custom interfaces to the simulator. So again, for training or for testing purposes, we could do a little bit more, some more interesting things with the API. The other method is the XML, which is basically like an XML spreadsheet. Where we can kind of use a spreadsheet to send XML and manipulate the variables that way. We'll demonstrate that in a separate video.